Boehner's broadside comes at a tough time for the president on the economy. According to today's Gallup poll, almost half of America rates the economy as poor. Another 62% say they expect economic conditions to deteriorate. Here now to discuss Boehner's broadside and whether Obama should fire his economic team is Joy-Ann Reid. She's editor of the Reid Report and columnist for the Miami Herald. Also with us is Dan Mitchell, senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Lady and gentlemen, good to see you. Dan, let me start with you. Is Boehner right? Should President Obama, especially in light of those Gallup numbers, fire his team?
Well, if there was such a thing as economic malpractice, there's no question that Geithner and Summers would be very vulnerable to a big lawsuit. Here's the problem, though. I have no problem with getting rid of those two, but Obama would probably put in place two people who have the same views of big government, high taxes, more regulation. My frustration, and I thought Biden made a good point about this, is that we had 8 years of big government under the Republicans, and now we've had a year and a half of big government under Obama, and it doesn't work when you have an R after your name, and it doesn't work when you have a D after your name.
Joy Reid, your response. Biden came out fighting, saying we had problems under Bush, and Dan Mitchell kind of actually agrees with them. We had big government then, too. What do you think?
Well, you know what? Maybe John Boehner should call for the firing of whichever Republicans decided to write the Bush tax cuts with an expiration date on them. That Democrats are basically just saying, let's follow the law as written by the Republicans. Look, I get it. I understand it. Boehner's job is to stump for the top 2% to make sure that they keep the tax cuts that are threatening to punch a $680 billion hole in the deficit if we continue to extend them to the wealthiest Americans. So I understand that that is who his clients are, the very rich. But the problem is for Boehner is that we pursued the economic policies he preferred. We pursued them for 8 years. And what that got us was an economy that was bleeding 700,000 jobs a month when Barack Obama took office.
And actually, Dan Mitchell, your point is that we didn't actually perceive them. I mean, the problem with the Republican Party right now is they seem to have found religion when it comes to spending. But under George Bush, they didn't. They spent like crazy. They were supposedly conservatives, but when you look at the balance sheet, actually, they weren't.
A conservative or a free market economic platform should have many different legs: low taxes, small government, deregulation, sound money. The only thing we got under Bush was the low taxes. On everything else, he was a big government guy, indistinguishable from Jimmy Carter or, for that matter, from Barack Obama. I would like Obama to actually learn lessons from the Clinton years, because other than the tax increase in his first year, Bill Clinton was a surprisingly free market president, probably helped, of course, by the 1994 Republican takeover of Capitol Hill. But I'd gladly take Bill Clinton over either George Bush or Barack Obama, because all I care about is not party labels. I want to free the American economy. I don't want the politicians here in Washington to take more of our money and more power.
Your take on, you were talking about tax cuts. I get it. What about spending?
Right. Well, if you look at the Bush years, 2/3 of the deficit that we're facing now had to do with just three things: the Bush tax cuts that gave the vast majority of them to the richest Americans, and the two wars that George Bush got us in, one of which was justified, one of which I don't think anybody at this point believes made any sense.
But you also leave out the 65% increase in the Department of Education, the increase in the Department of Labor of something like 65%. Those would be two parts of the government that Ronald Reagan actually wanted to get rid of and George Bush expanded. So I go back to my question, Joy.
Right.
You want to talk about the tax cuts. Talk to me about spending. Do you still endorse more spending like President Obama is doing?
Those things that you're talking about are marginal compared to the wars and the tax cuts. The tax cuts and the wars are such an overwhelming piece of the pie.
If I recall correctly, they were only
marginal.
1/5 of the increase in spending. But would you like to answer the question about whether we should continue spending right now?
Well, we should definitely stop spending on the excessive military and war spending that we're doing right now. That would help a lot. Pulling out of Iraq is going to help us out a lot. That is bleeding tremendous amounts of money from the economy. But if you want to talk about spending discipline, you have Republicans now that don't even want to do pay-go. They're not interested in having a serious debate about spending or taxes. All they're interested in doing is saying no. We can't have spending cuts, and we can't have reasonable tax policy without a little bipartisanship.
That is the music. That means it's over. Joy-Ann Reid, thank you so much. Dan Mitchell.